Behind me, the screen displayed deployment schedules and server migration plans, but all I could hear was the relentless hum of my phone vibrating in my pocket. I was mid-sentence, guiding the executive team through a security rollout, when the vibrations suddenly intensified 3, 4, 5 in a row. I paused. Never in a million years would I stop a presentation this crucial, but something in my gut twisted sharply. I excused myself with a quick, "Give me a moment," and stepped out into the hallway. Unlocking my phone, I stared at the screen. The first message was from my mother. "You're not invited. Serene doesn't want you there." I blinked, thinking I'd misread. But the next message came almost immediately, as if on cue. "There's been a change of plans. Serene feels you've been making the wedding about yourself." It went on. Caleb's parents offered help, but they asked for a drama-free day. My hands trembled as I scrolled further. "Please don't overreact. She just wants this day to be perfect. We hope you can understand." Understand? After all the deposits I covered, over $98,000, paying for the venue, catering, photographer, rentals, each expense transferred from my account with the quiet hope it would bring us closer. Now I was being erased, sanitized from the day I helped create. My vision was being wiped away, replaced by a carefully curated version of the day I wasn't part of. My pulse pounded in my ears. I typed back one word, "Why?" Her typing bubble blinked for a long moment, then vanished altogether. Inside the conference room, the air grew heavier, suffocating. I forced myself to pick up the clicker and finish the presentation on autopilot, fully in control, but no one noticed, or maybe they did, and chose to say nothing. Later that night, I sank onto my couch, the messages still open on my screen, jaw clenched. I wasn't just excluded, I was discarded. And for the first time in my life, something inside me didn't wilt. It ignited. At home on Rosewood Street, roles weren't assigned, they just happened. Saren had the sparkle. I had the clipboard. When pipes burst during a winter freeze, I was the one Googling emergency plumbers while Mom paced anxiously. When Dad forgot the electric bill again, I called the utility company and set up a payment plan. I was 12. Saren was still figuring herself out, Mom would say, whenever I pointed out the imbalance. "You've always just known what to do." I wore competence like armor, even when it pinched. Saren floated through school on a cloud of last-minute extensions and charm. I stayed up rewriting essays, color-coding notebooks, building systems where none existed. She twirled through cheer practice, while I volunteered at science fairs and handled FAFSA forms alone. When I graduated as valedictorian, no one was surprised, they just hoped I wouldn't disappoint. I left for college in Seattle with 2 duffel bags and a silent vow never to rely on anyone the way others relied on me. 4 years later, I walked across the stage, summa cum laude, with a job offer in hand. I worked late, saved aggressively, and lived in a tiny studio with paper-thin walls, while others celebrated their first paychecks. When our startup sold, I woke up a millionaire, no fanfare, no luxury car, just a quiet balance in my account, the first genuine space I'd ever known. That's when the calls started. Dad needed a new car. Mom's hours were cut. Saren's lease fell through. I helped every time, not because I was asked, but because I'd been trained to anticipate the ask before it even came. So, when Saren got engaged, helping with the wedding felt like another unspoken expectation. It began with a midnight call. Saren's breathless voice buzzed through the line. "Talia!" He proposed on a boat at sunset. It was perfect. I was groggy but happy for her. She sounded like she'd stepped out of one of those Pinterest boards she used to scroll through in high school. She wanted a small, intimate wedding. Then she mentioned the Griffin Estate, a venue that started at $50,000 just for the basics. "Don't worry," she rushed to add. "Caleb's parents are considering helping, and I know Mom and Dad can't do much, but we'll figure it out. Maybe just help with some of the small stuff." I said yes without asking for details. My default was always yes. 2 weeks later, she slid a spreadsheet across the table during brunch. It was color-coded and terrifying, a total budget of $120,000. Small stuff apparently included the entire venue deposit, photographer, catering, and a dozen other essentials. "We're just waiting to hear back from Caleb's parents," she said softly, as if that explained everything. "They're not fully on board yet." By then, I'd already transferred the deposit for the Griffin Estate and paid the first invoice for catering. The calls kept coming. The florist needed a rush deposit. The designer dress was being discontinued. The band Caleb loved suddenly had an opening if we moved fast. Each time, it sounded urgent, as if only I could save the day. I made spreadsheets, tracked receipts, convinced myself that once the wedding was over, I'd breathe again, and they'd remember I made it happen. But somewhere between the third invoice and the fifth urgent Venmo request, I stopped being a sister and started being a silent business partner, one who wasn't in the photos but always footed the bill. When I finally asked what Caleb's family was contributing, Saren hesitated. They're unsure. Maybe later. It's just a stressful time. Apparently, that stress didn't stop them from booking a spa retreat for her bachelorette weekend without telling me. Slowly, I noticed small signs. A group chat I wasn't added to. A florist meeting scheduled during my quarterly review. A cake tasting I saw on Instagram. Every time I asked, Saren had an excuse. I was busy, or she'd say she thought I'd be too overwhelmed. I wanted to believe her. I told myself she was just overwhelmed. But the pattern hardened. I kept showing up, adjusted meetings, took early trains, tried to reinsert myself into a process that had quietly moved on without me. One afternoon, I dropped off contracts at a boutique hotel near Saren's apartment. I stopped for coffee and overheard her talking with her maid of honor, Kendra. I froze when I heard my name. She's such a control freak, Saren said, not lowering her voice. Just because she's paying doesn't mean it's her wedding. Kendra nodded. At least you're not going into debt, right? Saren chuckled. Small price to pay for her spreadsheets and passive-aggressive comments. I just wish she'd send the money and stay out of it. I backed away, hence trembling. That night, I looked at the color-coded budget I'd spent hours organizing, suddenly questioning who I'd built it for. I thought I was helping, supporting, being the sister who showed up. But it turned out, showing up was the problem. And then, the messages kept coming, buried in a work meeting, during a Slack notification, signaling that the next chapter of the story was only just beginning. Notifications and code deployment alerts pinged relentlessly. Among them, a message from someone on Caleb's side, someone I barely knew, popped up. Hey, sorry to hear you're not coming. Hope you're feeling better. I stared at it, confused. Then another came through. Serene said you've been having episodes. I didn't know things were that bad. My hands went cold. Episodes. I called my mom during a break. She answered on the third ring, already bracing herself. Talia, I was going to call you tonight. What did she tell them? I asked. There was a pause. She just said you've been overwhelmed lately. That maybe the stress is affecting your behavior. Overwhelmed. I repeated flatly. Is that what we're calling it now? Instead of admitting I'd paid for 90% of her wedding, while being ignored and insulted, she told Caleb's family I was mentally unstable. She didn't mean it like that. She's under so much pressure, my mom said softly, as if that made it better. Caleb's parents are finally warming up to the wedding, she added. She's just afraid something will ruin it. Something like me. Silence. I whispered more to myself than to her. I'm not the problem. The problem is she's been lying to everyone, including you. And you'd rather protect the fantasy than face the truth. Sweetheart, it's complicated. No, it's really not. I hung up before she could say more. Standing in my office, I stared at my reflection in the dark monitor. Something inside me shifted. Not anger, not sadness, but clarity. They were never going to see me. Not unless I stopped making it so easy for them to make me disappear. The next morning, I did something none of them saw coming. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of cold tea, illuminated by the glow of my laptop screen. Surrounding me were printed contracts, email threads, and spreadsheets I knew by heart. I had receipts for everything: venue deposits, catering, florals, photographer, rentals, all meticulously documented. 55 files, all obsessively updated over the past 6 months. I opened a new document and created 3 columns: pending payments, cancelable services, and non-refundable. I went down each line, mapping every dollar. No anger, no tears, just surgical precision. I started with the venue. The Griffin Estates contract had a partial refund clause if canceled more than 72 hours in advance. I called Susan, the coordinator I'd spent months emailing. Hi, Susan. This is Talia Rowan. I need to cancel the reservation. There was a pause. Oh, may I ask why? I'm no longer attending the wedding I paid for, and I can't keep supporting it. To her credit, she didn't push. She walked me through the cancellation process, the refund, even offered to send a statement for tax purposes. Next, I contacted the florist, the DJ, the rental company, the bartenders. One by one, I reversed everything I had set in motion. Most vendors understood. Some already knew what was happening. You're not the first, the photographer told me quietly. But you're probably the bravest. By early evening, I canceled everything I could. I transferred the partial refunds into my savings and logged off. Then, I accessed the shared planning folder. Everyone had access, but no one contributed, and downloaded and backed everything up. I deleted it all. Every seating chart, quote, spreadsheet. Gone. I closed my laptop, exhaling slowly. I hadn't realized how much space all that took up, physically, mentally, emotionally. For the first time in months, I felt weightless. And then my phone rang. I already knew who it was. Saren. The moment I answered, she was already screaming. What the hell is wrong with you? Her voice cracked with anger. The venue called. The florist canceled. Everything's falling apart, and it's your fault. I remained calm. You made it clear I wasn't welcome. Now you have neither the wedding nor me. She sobbed, then hung up. 5 minutes later, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. Then came my father's name and a string of unread texts I didn't bother to open. I blocked them all, out of self-preservation, not anger. I opened a browser window and searched for cabins on the Washington coast. I found one tucked into the woods near a stretch of beach I remembered from a childhood road trip. No Wi-Fi, no cell service, just silence. I booked it for a week, packed a duffel, and left before the city even stirred. No explanation, no warning. By the time they realized I was gone, I was already on the ferry, face to the wind, watching the shoreline recede. There was no revenge in my heart, only quiet, only space. As the boat drifted toward the peninsula, I felt something loosen in my chest, a tension that had built over years. The cabin was smaller than I imagined, one room, a wood stove, a battered kitchen table that became my sanctuary. I left my laptop at home. My phone stayed off. The silence wasn't empty. It was a presence I hadn't felt in years. Each morning, I hiked through trails scented of pine and moss. On the second day, I brought a journal, not for work or planning, but blank pages where I wrote everything I never said aloud. I wrote about the birthday Saren skipped, the nights I stayed up fixing Dad's taxes, Christmases I paid for everyone's gifts and no one noticed, the feeling of being useful but never cherished, counted on but never truly counted in. By the 5th day, I discovered a waterfall tucked at the end of a narrow trail. I sat nearby, tearing each journal page into strips, letting them drift into the current one by one. It felt childish, sacred, cleansing. When I left the peninsula, the pain remained, but it was sharper now, shaped on my terms. I booked a therapist before I even unpacked. And for the first time in a long while, I finally started to reclaim myself. Dr. Kessler didn't ask for my backstory right away. She asked who I was when I wasn't fixing things for other people. That question made me cry the first time she asked it. We started slow, patterns, boundaries, family myths. I showed up every week, gradually stopping the need to justify what I felt, to explain who I was. The grief didn't disappear, but it stopped dominating the room. When the holidays came, I didn't return to Eugene. I made other plans, my own. Spring arrived quietly, without grand revelations, just small choices that added up. I changed my email signature. I unsubscribed from the group text. I stopped answering questions that started with, "Can you just..." I rerouted the energy I used to spend managing other people's crises, like applying for a coding scholarship for girls in rural schools or donating monthly to a reforestation project in the Olympic Peninsula, those same woods that helped me breathe again. It felt good to give without obligation. My therapist called it emotional repurposing. She said I'd spent so long being the family's emergency contact that I'd forgotten how to belong to myself. I spent Thanksgiving with coworkers who cooked from YouTube tutorials and laughed at their own burnt pies. On Christmas morning, I drank coffee in a house filled with friends passing around board games instead of expectations. In therapy, we mapped out my family roles, emotional outsourcing. Dr. Kessler explained, They made you the container. They poured their stress into you and called it closeness. I nodded, already knowing it was true. I just hadn't had words for it. We also discussed guilt. How my parents raised me to feel responsible for everyone's comfort. How Serene's fragility had become the axis around which our family revolved. But now I was choosing a new orbit, one that didn't require shrinking myself. I stopped keeping tabs, stopped reading between the lines of half-hearted texts. I let the silence stretch. Then, one January afternoon, a pale blue envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address, just my name written in handwriting I hadn't seen since childhood. The envelope was soft at the edges, as if carried around for days. Inside was a simple card, no flowers, no embossed script, just Serene's handwriting, smaller than I remembered. I owe you an apology. Can we talk? No excuses, no explanations, just those words. I read it twice before setting it on the windowsill. It stayed there for 3 days until I finally texted her that Tuesday at 3 p.m., Grace and Finch Cafe. She replied with a single, "I'll be there." I arrived early, ordered mint tea, and chose a table near the back. When Saren walked in, I barely recognized her. Gone were the heels and curated waves. She wore a gray sweater, no makeup, her hair in a messy knot that looked unintentional. "I'm not sure where to start," she said after we sat. Her voice was soft, calm. I didn't answer. I waited. "I've been in therapy," she said. "October. Caleb and I are divorcing. He didn't do anything wrong." "Exactly. I built my whole identity around someone else's approval. Yours, Mom's." I kept listening. I told lies, big ones, about you, about your mental health. I was afraid his family wouldn't accept me. So, I gave them a version of reality where I wasn't the problem. And I let you carry the cost, financially, emotionally, in every way. I didn't feel anger. Not anymore. Just a gentle ache, softened by time. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she continued. "I just want you to know I see it now. All of it." We sat in silence for a long moment. We didn't hug. We didn't talk about the future. But when she asked if I wanted to see the program she was applying to, a certificate in early education, I nodded. We weren't sisters again. Not yet. But we weren't strangers either. And that, somehow, was enough to begin. The space is quiet now, but not empty. The dining table I built from reclaimed wood has 6 mismatched chairs, each filled tonight. Friends pass dishes, share stories, refill each other's glasses. No one questions what I brought to deserve my seat, they simply make space. Across the room, Brian catches my eye and smiles. It's not the kind that asks for anything, just recognition. We met months ago at a tech meetup. I almost didn't attend. He asked what I did outside of work, and I didn't know how to answer. Now I do. I host. I mentor. I write. I live. After everyone leaves, I wash the dishes in warm water and soft light. On the shelf above the sinks is a small folded card, cream paper, ink slightly smudged. I found it tucked inside a thank you note from a scholarship recipient last month. "You were never the backup plan. You were the blueprint." I run my finger across the words. Let them settle. 4 years. I gave my place at the table away and called it love. Now I build my own. Every seat here was made with care, not apology.